Welcome to Petronoia, the podcast that cuts through the noise of the energy debate. Hosted by Dan Romito, this show takes complex energy issues, strips away the agendas, and delivers clear fact-based insights. Whether you're an industry expert or simply looking for a balanced perspective, Petronoia brings clarity to the conversation. Each episode, Dan breaks down key topics, from U.S. energy independence to global policy impacts, focusing on the facts rather than the rhetoric, helping listeners make sense of the energy landscape. This is Petronoia, where we separate fact from fiction to fuel-informed discussions.
Welcome to the Petronoia podcast. I'm Dan Romito. I am here in the Upright Digital Studios, brought to you by Praying and Associates. I'm here with my boy, Matt Chang, fellow Floridian. Matt, well, I'm on a roll, man. So I'm making it a point to try to find like more Floridians as opposed to Texans. Love me, Texas, right? But it's not like it's the only game in town, Texas, that is. And also, man, all I've been doing for like the last month is talking natural gas. So want to get some perspective on what's going on in the rest of the energy space and know that you're working on some really cool technologies. But before we let it rip, you have a really interesting background. So why don't you break down how you got to where you are today and what you're working on, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, well, cool. Well, the good news for this podcast today is I don't know much about natural gas. So
good. I'm sick of talking about it.
Even if I had to fake it, I would have trouble.
It's natural and it's gas. That's all you have to know.
Yeah, so what we're working on today, quick background, I'm the founder of a robotics company, Chang Robotics, and we are not constrained to a single industry. So we work basically where the customers come calling that need robots deployed in the workforce. That's our key thing is not robot for robot's sake, but where do you need the robots in the workforce? And then we design and implement solutions that work in the, whatever the operation is. So at this point in the company's lifespan, we're in a variety of industries. I'd say what's really hot right now is manufacturing. So that kind of Trump effect of, hey, we're going to make stuff in the USA, that is real. And our phone has been ringing pretty consistently about people wanting stuff. It's obviously not a quick turnaround time, right? So from the time you make the phone call till you have robots operational, typically it's about a year, right? So we were very fortunate. Last year, we spent a ton of time in engineering, designing things that are now getting funded. So we're working pretty heavily in the advanced manufacturing space. Those are industrially robust robots. Odds are you're never going to see them. They're in a secured facility. And
it's not like the Skynet T1000. Yeah, it's going to come out and take over the world. You got to find John Connor to save that time.
Yeah,
behind the scenes.
Basically, our job right now is to tamp down inflation in the Costco and Walmart supply chain, right? So the stuff that we're making is consumer bound. The things that we're helping make are consumer bound, and so really what it's going to do is drive cost out of the products that you use in your household, right? And
okay. Well, real quick, if you don't mind, because inflation is top of mind for everybody right there. So let's go down that rabbit hole. I have this theory, and I want to be proven wrong, right? I'm a pro-Trump guy, clearly, and love sort of the vision that he's employed. But where I get a little bit concerned, if I'm being honest, is I think the probability of him being able to rein in inflation is actually pretty low. And it could be anyone in the office. I don't think it's a Trump thing at all. I just think the policies that the Biden administration put in terms of the impact on inflation, that is going to be around for a really long time. And I think the expectations that people have in terms of how much inflation is going to go down, I don't think the expectation should be prices are going to go down. I think the expectation should be they aren't going to rise as much as they would have under a Biden or Harris, whatever you want to call it, administration. So you're telling me that you're employing technologies and you're working on innovative capabilities today that will theoretically reduce pricing? Like, break that down for me. Number one, am I wrong? And I hope I am. But
no. What we know about you is you're an amazing researcher, and I'm working my way through your book. So we got to plug the Dan Romito book.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Yeah, Radical Middle.
That's right. We are in the radical middle. That's us.
That's right.
So So here's kind of the way to think of it is right now we have a micro view because we do a single factory at a time, or we do perhaps a network of factories that are all making similar products, right? So we're very much boots on the ground. Where manufacturers are getting crushed right now is margin compression.
Yeah.
And here's basically the economics of it is their raw material costs are still going up. The raw materials they consume to manufacture are still going up in price. Their labor base is still going up in price. So that is very real. In theory, they have to pass along those price hikes to, basically to the consumer.
Right.
Since we're on the Pickering Energy Partners podcast here, I do want to say that electricity and energy is still going up, right?
Yeah.
That we never talked about the cost of energy. Now it's a focal point. It's top three. It's up there. It's raw materials, labor, energy. Those are the top three design points that we're trying to influence. So what we're basically doing is we're putting in systems that allow them to flatten their cost of production and deal with the raw material price increases and deal with the labor increases.
Okay.
So the other issue that you have is when you sell into the big box stores like Costco, Walmart, Target, your best case for a price hike is like 6 months out, right? They don't tolerate price hikes. There's a big lag when the manufacturer sees the cost hikes to when they might be able to pass it on. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep their price flat in the store, not up a little bit, but flat to where it is now. And they're trying to
eat into the manufacturer's margin.
That's right. The manufacturers are getting crushed right now. And so they're trying to absorb the raw material price hikes and the labor price hikes and the energy price hikes without passing on additional costs to the consumer. The only way you can do that is to manufacture at a lower cost. Yep, it's the only way. So that's what we're doing is we're deploying technology systems that reduce the cost of manufacturing, the number of times you got to touch something, the amount of time it lingers around in the factory, the amount of inventory you have to hold on hand. We're trying to get that highly efficient, highly automated, and then that lets them keep their price flat.
So it's almost like a cake and have your cake and eat it too, right? Because theoretically, if you want lower cost of production, you have to go to predominantly developing economies with this push from the Trump administration to reshore everything.
Yeah.
You're saying you can have the best of both worlds by saying, okay, let's reshore. That makes total sense, right? There's a variety of positive externalities that result from that. But you have to employ more automated technologies in order to do that because the labor in the United States is super expensive.
Totally. Whenever I'm counseling with like a board or a C-suite,
yeah,
and they're kind of wrestling with this dilemma of what to make and where to make it, right? That's kind of manufacturing 101 is what I say is your competition is not the automated factory that might pop up in the town one over. Your competition is China and Vietnam and India, Korea, these other centers that are either highly automated like Japan and Korea or have a better labor advantage. So they just throw more bodies at it and they don't notice the price increase. Right. So if you want to compete on a global basis, you got to have the best cost of production in the USA. And, this whole, the threat of tariffs is not new, right? So we're talking about tariffs right now, and we import some automation in our business from time to time. So we're looking at that as well. But was it 3-4 years ago? It was the cost of sea freight.
Yeah.
That was a huge penalty. So this idea that cost of input is variable due to external factors, whether it be sea containers can't get to Long Beach, or it's the price of diesel goes up, so the cost of freighting something, changes. It's not new. It's just a different variable.
So everyone's bringing up tariffs, rightfully so. We just had one of my buddies on who's doing natural gas storage, and he's saying the tariffs associated with steel that we just slapped on Canada unfortunately provides a lot of variability in the space where doing business actually makes it pretty hard. What's your take on the whole tariff thing? Let me hear your take, and then we'll dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, I think, if I'm just to be selfish and look at my own business, there is a real chance that tariffs are going to increase prices of a robot or of a piece of automated machinery. Right. Automation is a global game. robots are manufactured around the world.
Mhm.
So it is a bit like whack-a-mole. We might be engineering something for 6 or even 12 months on a major project, and then we go to make a purchase of a piece of technology. If there's suddenly a tariff, that's a huge variable cost on that piece of technology, right?
Right.
Um,
Does the cost savings associated with automation give way to a little, or give a little bit of leeway to introduce a tariff, right, to make our automation a little bit more appealing? Like, does that question make sense? Like, what I'm trying to get at is, like, is there enough of a cost savings with the automation to where it would offset the potential price increase brought upon by a tariff?
Oh yeah, it's a rounding error. It's a rounding error. So here's a rule of thumb. If I sold you a robot or a group of robots for $1 million, it's going to cost me at least $1 million to have it installed.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's all U.S. labor. That's all U.S. supply. So the cost of tariffs, if we look at a CapEx project, I know you guys deal with CapEx a lot. It's going to be just
it's my favorite metric.
it's going to be a few percent, change to the CapEx. So if your payback model on, hey, we want to automate and it's got to be good for the business, if it was so sensitive that a few percentage points on the CapEx moved the needle, it wasn't a very good project to begin with.
Right.
So I don't personally think that's an issue. It is going to take a while. Like, as you know, building out supply chain logistics manufacturing, that is a multi-year journey for any company to endeavor.
That was my question. When you say a while, are we reasonable expectations? Is that 2 years, 3 years, 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, during COVID, we built a $600 million coffee manufacturing plant.
Okay.
It took 3.5 years.
Yeah.
There's a clock speed to these things. You're going to want the building official to approve your project, right? You're going to want the insurance company to underwrite it. You're going to have to source everything. You're going to have to assemble a workforce of skilled trades to get this thing built. And then you're going to go through a period where you qualify the new factory that it meets the standards of your end customers. So that's going to be, 3, 4, 5 years, depending on the size. For a smaller thing, maybe you get it stood up in 1.5 or 2 years. But that's where that clock speed of, if we start limiting imports through tariffs, for us to build out the domestic supply chain is a multi-year process.
Yeah, it's a little bit counterintuitive, right? You have to go a little bit easy on the tariffs to facilitate the ability to import the widgets that would facilitate the future ability to reshore all this manufacturing, right? Is that the way to think about it?
Yeah.
And then, like, is this on the administration's radar? Like, once again, like, I know a lot in terms of, like, the regulatory environment or the impending regulatory environment with oil and gas, but with manufacturing, is this something that the administration is going to make easier, or is that timetable pretty definitive?
I mean, the timetable is physical reality of designing and building something and getting all the checkoffs in the middle. I don't see that the administration can do anything to make a new manufacturing facility go faster. That's not realistic. What I am curious to see is, over the last several years, beginning with Trump into Biden, and now we have Trump again, there was federal funding through both grants and loans being made available for strategic industries that were deemed critical to the national defense or the national supply chain.
Which manufacturing would obviously be in that mix.
Yeah. Manufacturing and source materials. You're not building a factory without steel. You talked about steel already. So are we helping the steel industry prepare for the domestic demand of American steel, right? We have largely offshored those primary material production to other countries. A lot of our plastics are made overseas.
Yep.
A lot of our steel, aluminum, these are critical building blocks to get anything done.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm very curious to see, is that the administration doubles down and says, okay, we're putting up the tariff wall, which I don't have a personal opinion on. And then, but we're also creating incentive mechanisms so people have access to capital to go build new plants.
Yeah. I mean, this, just to expand upon that a little bit, right? I don't necessarily see the utility of tariffs against, say, Canada. I fully understand it with Mexico, right? There's an issue there, whether it's the border, the fentanyl, or cartels, whatever. Like, there's an inherent penalty that frankly, they should be subject to. But with the Canadians, I feel like more it's like Trump being old Doyle from Billy Madison and just like throwing kids in a locker just for the simple sake
Yeah.
of doing it. And if the directive is to enhance the competitive positioning of the United States, particularly over the long term, like I get it, Canadians are goofballs and maple syrup, as I joke, is overrated, but I don't necessarily understand the utility of employing a tariff. And to contradict myself, Trump is not an idealist by any stretch of the imagination. Like at best, and I say this respectfully, he's a utilitarian, right? He's going to understand the state of the state as it exists today and say, we have to change to make it better.
So, I mean, here's kind of my view on Canada. By the way, I am importing a truckload of autonomous robots from Canada this month.
Yeah.
And the new tariff deadline for Canada is April 1st. So I'm pretty excited about the timing on that specific use case. But
there you go. Yeah, beat the clock.
So
it would be hilarious, real quick. Would it be hilarious if you made your robot say a boot?
Oh, they do. We have to reprogram them to speak American English.
You have the Skynet T1000 say a boot instead of like the regular pronunciation.
Yeah, we the first thing we do is we take off the Canadian voice and we put on an American voice, and it's also a female voice. We find people kind of like female robots better. So
is that
that's an example.
No, man, the Siri voice gets annoying. Anyway, we digress.
You should try the British accent. That's the one I use. It's like having a personal assistant right there in my pocket. So yeah, I mean, when it comes to Canada, here's what I'd say is Canada does put a lot of regulatory burden on American companies working in Canada. So if you or I, as two industry experts, if we want to go up to Canada and work, that's going to be a lot of paperwork. It's going to be a lot of hoops to jump through.
Okay.
For Canadian companies to come to the U.S., it's far easier. So what I don't disagree with is reciprocity, right? If we're going to make it easy for Canadian companies to do business in America, Canada should do the same for us. Now, I understand what they're worried about is we have so much scale, and the Canadian economy is more or less based off the U.S. economy, right? You look at where all the
Canadian economy in terms of just magnitude is like Illinois, right? It's like it's a single state. It's nothing impressive.
Yeah, but we should have reciprocity, right? So if Canadians want to do a lot of business with the U.S. and U.S. companies like mine, we desire to do business in Canada, we should at least have some parity in the rules. And that goes like, I'm a professional engineer. It's very difficult for me to travel to Canada under work pretense because they don't want American engineers coming up there. They're worried about
protective of downturns.
Right. And then when my Canadian friends come down to the U.S., what do? They hop on a flight, they show up in Atlanta or Dallas, or wherever we are, and they just go to work. So we do need to figure out how we get kind of parity with countries so that we have the same set of rules. And I think that's probably the ultimate goal.
So Trump is not necessarily, as I said, O'Doyle from Billy Madison. There's this aspect where in many ways Canada's taking advantage of us and we want it a little bit more fair in terms of the manner in which we can go back and forth, correct?
Yeah. And I think that's where you saw the spat around the automobile production. Right.
No. Well, yeah. Break that down for us.
So the summary is, let's start with this. In Quebec, they have free electricity. Right.
What?
We got to take it back to energy because Canada has an abundance of hydro. So up there in Quebec, they're really good at car parts manufacturing, primary aluminum manufacturing. Okay. That type of stuff takes a lot of energy when you have casting or electro refining. These are energy intensive processes. So Canada basically uses their natural resource of the rivers. They create a hydro plant and then they have free electricity, if you want to think of it in macro terms, going into their preferred industries. So there's already kind of a cost advantage. They also have a highly skilled workforce. So, a Canadian factory is likely to be very efficient, just from day one. And so the things that they're manufacturing, though, are value-added products for U.S. companies.
Give me an example. Like that makes sense conceptually, but what would be an example?
Well, Alcoa makes a lot of aluminum in Quebec, right? That's
Okay.
the American aluminum company. The auto industry buys a lot of subcomponents from Canada. Think of the building blocks that go into making a modern automobile.
Yeah.
In Canada does one thing. They put those on a truck and they send them to Detroit.
Okay.
And in modern U.S., they might also send them to Chattanooga or Knoxville or somewhere else that has automotive manufacturing.
But make a stop in Windsor, gamble a little bit, go to Detroit, and then make their way down.
You do one stop at the border to hit the last Tim Hortons, right?
Yeah.
And then you deliver your goods.
Tim Hortons still like you thing. Their coffee is disgusting.
But I think if you did your supply chain analysis that I've seen you do, Dan, and you look at it, not very few of those Canadian parts are going to Europe or India or other places that make cars. They're going to American factories. So because that means that they have CapEx investment, they have productivity, they have revenues, they have employees, they have all the things that make a business in Canada. That basically the sole purpose is to then sell products into the U.S.
Can I play devil's advocate and ask kind of a stupid question?
Sure.
All right. So if the vast majority or a significant portion of automobile inputs in the United States relies on Canadian manufacturing, and if one of the goals, as stated by not just the Trump administration, but believe it or not, one of the stated goals of Zeldin's EPA was to bring back the U.S. automotive industry. So it is very much a cross-agency directive. Wouldn't a tariff make those imports more expensive, and wouldn't that cost be passed along to the automobile, making the U.S. automobile industry less competitive? Or am I thinking about that right?
It will be in the final price. Yeah, 100%. And that, so if you tariff something 20%, once again, it's a subcomponent, so it's just a fraction of the value. It doesn't have the final, if it's Ford Motor Company, it doesn't have the final margin that they put on it. So that is a 20% more expensive part, inside the vehicle. Net, I'd forecast that you're looking at an extra 2 to 3% on the price of that vehicle.
So 20% in inputs doesn't necessarily translate, obviously, for like a 20% in price.
Right.
You're saying there's a smoothing factor that in the grand scheme of things doesn't necessarily make as much as an impact as some media outlets would report that it does.
That's right. Yeah. And then the other piece of it is we're talking about automotive. Maybe a lot of your listeners don't realize that Canada is a leader in aerospace manufacturing. So
Is that true?
Yeah. In fact, one of the best air shows for trade shows, one of the best aerospace trade shows in the world is in Montreal. And by the way, I highly recommend it. By the way, Montreal's down.
Yeah, man, Montreal is underrated. You got F1, and then you got this air show that you're talking about.
Yeah, and then the food is great, and
food is good.
The people are fun to listen to. So that's the same type of thing, though. Is Canada manufacturing finished aircraft? No, they're not. Those parts are headed to Charleston, South Carolina for final assembly at Boeing. They're headed to Wichita for including in the structural assemblies, or they're going out to Seattle, right? So that's another example where, Canada's a leader in subcomponent aerospace manufacturing.
Okay.
But all those finished goods are headed to the U.S., and they're going into U.S. finished aircraft. And so, the same will apply. Will the price of a 787 Dreamliner go up a little bit? Yeah, 2-3%. The point of sale.
Yeah, I mean the elasticity of a plane ticket, right? Am I gonna not travel as much as I do if the plane ticket goes from $400 to $410? Like, no, just gonna do it. Yeah, I mean it's interesting because when we talk about Canada, at least in my neck of the woods, right, the vast majority of the conversation has been, to your point, like the energy space. But I didn't realize that the Canadians are so adept with aerospace and certainly the automotive part. I mean, as far as it relates to your business or manufacturing, do they have anything else that we wouldn't necessarily be aware of?
Yeah, here's a fun one. Stretch wrappers.
Stretch wrap?
You know what a stretch wrapper is?
I don't even know what the hell that is. What's a stretch wrapper?
It's so weird. So all goods going to any box store come on a pallet, right?
Yes.
That means that in the warehouse or in the manufacturing plant, when it was being shipped, they had to wrap it with stretch.
Bro, dude, is this the shit that you buy at like Home Depot when you move and you know your wife makes you stretch wrap? I guess it is like every couch and
So 100% of pallets before they go in a truck to keep the load stable so they don't rattle off the pallet, they have to be stretch wrapped. So you got two options. You can play Dizzy Bat and you can walk around it yourself.
yeah,
You can with like that Depot.
I hate it.
Or you can buy an automated stretch wrapper.
Okay,
The number 2 company globally that makes stretch wrappers is in Quebec.
stop it.
So American factories.
Is a right or
If I took you behind the scenes, maybe we'll do this next month. Then, if I took you behind the scenes, the 10 manufacturing plants, kind of a house dust made tour.
Yeah. Oh, dude.
4 out of 10 of those plants would have a Canadian stretch wrapper at the end of the production machine, wrapping all the pallets. So that's something you never heard of. That company that does it, probably the biggest employer in their little town, and they're very good. You know, they're great stretch wrappers. I buy them all the time.
Man, South Park clearly has it wrong. Like, obviously, they rip on Canada way too long, which I should be listening to you. What is it? What the hell is this? How big is it? A stretch wrapper? Is it a robot? Like, you just on my favorite? Like, what is it?
So, all right, now you're in the engineering space.
I'm in the engineering space.
Yeah.
I have it.
In summary, it's just a gigantic mechanical piece of automation. It's got a pallet-sized conveyor going in. It's got some sensors. It's got a big robot arm that wraps the pallet, you know, with the stretch wrap, and then it discharges it. However, this is the however. Okay. What did your customer want? So if you're selling to Walmart and you don't have a lot of corrugate box in your pallet, and they tell you we want to stack them 4 high, now your stretch wrapper has to have little robots that put corner supports in there. Did your customer want a top sheet on top of the pallet? If so, that's a different robot that picks up a top sheet.
It has to handle weight, right? It's got to be able to support weight on top of it.
Yeah. So because your client might say, I'm going to stack these 4 high in my warehouse. That's the only way I'm buying it. And if you're selling a finished good, you don't want that bottom pallet crushing under the top, the 3 on top. So you might have to reinforce it. So I tell you, these stretch wrappers, just use that one example. When you buy the Cadillac version, these things are science fair projects. I mean, they're crazy.
Wait, so there's a Cadillac version. Are you implying there's like a GeoPrism version then? Like,
They're
just spectrum of, okay.
The GeoPrism one is if you want to fix it every other week.
Yeah.
No, it's just always broken. And then the worst is, you know, don't rip the stretch wrap. If the robot's not gentle and tender, it's going to rip the stretch wrap. Then you got to send a guy to your inside your automated stretch wrapper. He's got to reset everything. Okay. You got to try to run it again. So you just defeated the point of the automation because you have to have a man watching the robot thing that just stands there and goes inside periodically.
Then. Well, let me ask you this. So you're talking about all these cool technologies. Obviously, you brought up the point when with Quebec essentially getting electricity for free due to their sort of like just regional location. And you touched upon it a little bit. Energy prices have not come down, and for the foreseeable future, at least in my opinion, they're not necessarily going to go down. If anything, they will level out. You combine that with the increased utilization and introduction of all these hyperscale data centers that are just gobbling up electricity left and right. And then with the reshoring, obviously you need more power. You know, the most conservative forecast for anticipated power over the next, call it 5 years, is, hey, we're going to double power demand. Like, what are you seeing in terms of like the grid, in terms of like, is stuff being addressed? Is it going to get better? Is it a concern for you? Does this keep you up at night? Like, what's your state of the state in terms of like access to reliable power?
It is a problem. It is a problem. So you talked about Illinois.
Yeah.
I think you used to live there, right?
Yeah. So I was born in Chicago and, you know, did middle school, junior high, part of high school in Texas, and then went back for the remainder of high school and then college. So, and then obviously spent some of my professional career.
Yeah.
In Chicago. So people in Illinois, there's a distinction between Illinois and Chicago.
Yeah, so I'm going to do a cold weather example and a hot weather example for energy. We talk about energy all the time now because it is the pain point, both reliable energy and cost of energy. So in Illinois, they're decommissioning their coal-fired power plants. All right. one would think that that was happening as new production was coming online, nuclear, solar, whatever, right? Some new energy. Turns out they're just decommissioning the coal-fired power plants. So what that's leading to, we'll go back to production facilities. What that's leading to is there are production facilities that are losing entire product batch runs because there are brownouts. And if you lose a brownout in the middle of a process, most of the time, all that's going to scrap. It's all going to waste. You got to set up and start over again. So what the local solution is just to microgrid the factory. You know,
I mean, what do you mean by that?
Battery backup, and maybe if you have some extra land or rooftop, put some solar up there. Okay. But microgrid the factory so you have some buffer from utility impacts to actually being able to keep running manufacturing.
So in other words, you anticipate there being a potential brownout, and you just switch to some sort of backup.
Yeah, you don't get to anticipate it. It has to be automatic. So
it just happens.
The electricity doesn't come into the plant. The battery backup immediately steps in and powers the plant. That's how it's got to be set up.
Is that technology being employed, or are you being aspirational? Like, is this in place?
No, it's starting. It's starting. It's becoming its own, cottage industry that will soon be a big industry. When you see like Tesla makes these mega packs, and you ask like, where's the mega pack going? That's where the mega pack needs to go. Every factory needs to have 1 or 7 mega packs.
So in a weird twist of irony, all these governors like California and Illinois, they're taking a crap on Elon. Ironically, Elon's saving their ass because he's producing the power source that is not common for industrial businesses to be decimated.
California has made the news. They obviously have their energy issues. I mean, we all do. Texas, you do. Florida, we do. We all have our energy issues. But they're taking down nuclear in California, right?
They're taking down nuclear in California.
Yeah, they're losing production because they're decreasing nuclear energy production.
Why?
Last year. I'm not the why guy, Dan. I'm not the policy. Yeah, I'm the engineer. I'm the go fix it guy.
Yeah, go. Jesus, go fix it.
I'm gonna go. So last year in peak demand, which is like July, August, when it's hot and everybody's running the AC, California got 13% of their electrical capacity from battery backup. So
which is
you charge up at night because you have low. You have low demand at night, so you charge the batteries at night. That means in the peak load condition, 13% of the energy was deployed from batteries. All right, well, back to your question. Who is making those batteries?
Yeah. Oh, my God, man. One of the things that absolutely drives me nuts is like this retreat from common sense and economic reality where California, right, wants to electrify the entire fleet, and you're telling me right now that they don't even have enough juice to power what they have, and they're relying on these backup sources just because that's the direction that they want to head in. Like they're doing this consciously.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's a good summary. You know what we should do? We should meet in the radical middle.
We should. Great plug, Matt. I like where your head's at. So, I mean, bringing it back to Illinois, Illinois is retiring coal plants, which to a certain extent kind of makes sense given the access to natural gas. But you're telling me that it's not concurrent. They're just reducing coal and there's nothing taking its place.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So in many ways, like it's not just necessarily the cost structure or the tax system given by states. It's this very foolish, let's call it what it is, energy policy that's responsible for like, hey, maybe we move to Texas, maybe we go to South Carolina, maybe we go to Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have that's the problem with manufacturing in a place like India, right, where the grid is notoriously unreliable.
Right. That's what that's where I was going to ask next, but go on.
Yeah, if you don't have access to reliable energy, you got to do one of two things. You got to design your own power plant on site. Okay. Batteries or generation, whatever you're going to do. That's obviously expensive.
Yeah.
Or you got to go to a place that's going to guarantee the power. Like those are the only two options. What you're not going to do, think of your base advanced manufacturing facility starts at $100 million. Mm-hmm. No company or investor is putting $100 million up to multi-billions of dollars into a location where they can't be guaranteed to run. So what do we need? We need internet and we need power. Those are kind of givens. We need water, right? If we don't have access to those things, we got problems.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point, and this is something that I've railed on endlessly. Is we talk constantly about more power, more power, more power. I think what a lot of people don't necessarily realize is that power as an industry is incredibly water intensive. And then you think about sort of the geopolitical dynamics taking place with China and Taiwan and the semiconductor business and reshoring that semiconductor business back to the United States. Not only do you need a ridiculous amount of incremental baseload power to facilitate that reshoring, but semiconductors are a top 3 water intensive industry as well. And the state of water in the United States.
Yeah.
Great. Like,
do you have one? This will kind of help bring it home. Do you use ChatGPT or AI? Okay. You ever ask it a tough question where it just kind of spins, like you're trying to get it to do your work for you, and it just spins?
I know my boys constantly asking about fantasy football, like questions, and create stupid algorithms like the Jack Hamilton.
Here was a number I just heard from a guy that builds data centers, the compute clusters for AI.
Mm.
A simple question to ChatGPT burns about a half gallon of water. A complicated question, like what you and I do, I know you're pushing it to the max.
That's right.
A complicated question to ChatGPT can burn 2 gallons of water. And you'd say, well, that doesn't make any sense. How does water go into the GPU? Well, here's the engineering side. Those GPUs get hot.
Yep.
And to cool them off, you have to have a cooling tower outside. The cooling tower is water cooled. And so you're constantly running this hot water from the GPUs through the cooling tower. You're blowing air against it. It evaporates into the sky, and that's how the water's burned off. So yeah, that's like how does silicon manufacturing use water? There's no water. It's because it's a heat process. And to cool it down, you got to have a gigantic cooling tower outside.
What's the technology? Do you know, like, the technology to like recycle that water? I mean, it evaporates, to your point, and like there is no potential to recycle.
Yeah, well, only a portion is evaporating. Most of it is being cooled off and recirculated. But then you have all these big chemical companies like Nalco. You wonder what they do. That's their primary business, is they do the chemical treatment on the water, because the water is getting more and more hard, right? You're just left with the mineralized water. Right. You got to soften the water. So yeah, I mean, it's the same stuff you have on your house, whether it's water softener, filter, or softeners. You got to have something there to make the water so it can go back into the computer without calcifying the tubes inside the computer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the frustrating thing too is, not to rant too much. I like to think I'm an optimist, but most of the reshoring with the semiconductors is in like Arizona in the desert.
Yeah.
Instead of like Wisconsin by, I don't know, like the Great Lakes. There's a lot of water in the Great Lakes.
So Arizona is funny. Here's a since we're on this engineering kind of tangent here, Arizona and Phoenix specifically sits on what's known as a rechargeable aquifer. Okay.
A rechargeable.
So they have this cavernous aquifer that sits below Phoenix.
Okay.
That the state has proactively surcharged. It's full. They filled the aquifer artificially.
Okay.
Using water from wherever, the reservoir, Colorado River, California. Yeah, none of those states have water. And so Phoenix calculates that they can run the city for 3 years with no more water. That's how much water is underground. So that's actually a natural resource they have, is they have this huge reservoir underground that's water. And I mean, and they not just that, they have agriculture, they have dairy. Those are huge industries out there in Arizona. Wow. They have a lot of food manufacturing, like bottled water and stuff out there. So, so that helps, I guess, that they have that asset as a community, but it doesn't solve the root problem, which is if you need a ton of water on an annual basis, you're not getting that much.
And just 3 years, look, that's a lot, but in terms of just duration, it just doesn't seem it would last that long. I bet that 3 years would fly.
Yeah. California has a similar problem, but theirs doesn't have a solution. So here's a fun one.
Yeah.
The San Joaquin Valley, this is Central Valley. I used to live there right out of college.
Oh, really?
Very cool experience. There was dairies on 3 sides of me. So the air smelled good if the wind blew from one direction. But the 3 other directions, the air smelled like dairy. Okay.
Right.
So they have a collapsible, compressible aquifer.
What does that mean?
That means it's not made of like cavernous rock. It's made of like clay. So as you pump the water out of the aquifer, the ground sinks, and you can never recharge it. It sinks and compresses.
So once it's gone, it's the Michael Scott. If you don't use it, you lose it, right?
That's right. So the Central Valley of California, this stat's about 5 years old, so it could be worse.
Okay.
Since they started modern irrigation out there, has sank 17 feet.
17 feet?
17 feet.
I mean, dude, figure out that the coastline of Florida, like, it went down like 2 centimeters or whatever it is. It's gone down 17 feet.
17 feet. So, and there's no bringing it back up. It's not like Arizona where you can pump it back full and right, So once it's gone, and that raises another question, which is, we get a significant amount of our food from California.
Yeah.
Even here in Florida, if you check the label, quite a bit of the food is from California. Those farmers need lots of water. Mm-hmm. So what happens when the aquifer just doesn't have water? Do we have a plan for that? Right? Because they're actively depleting it.
Yeah, I mean, I was having this conversation, I think a couple of weeks ago, and it was with someone who wasn't that friendly to the oil and gas space. Their thesis was, we need to get rid of it, and we need to get rid of it tomorrow. And you walk them through sort of all the things that they probably don't necessarily understand. That
you had to watch Landman, didn't you?
Oh my God, please, man! Every fucking episode, sorry. Every meeting, man. Every meeting. It's like, does that really happen? It's like, no. Anyway, it's been great for the oil and gas space. I still haven't watched it. I will. But one of the things on farming that people don't necessarily realize is nitrogen-based fertilizers, which allows the vast expansion of fruit production and agricultural efficiency. That's facilitated from natural gas.
Yeah.
And so now you're telling me that California, a state which is no fan of natural gas, and that's a conversation for another day, simultaneously has this issue where the Grand Valley is sinking, and which does put into question like future food or access to food. Like, I don't understand for the life of me what the hell California is thinking. Like, all these things seem like, wow, like maybe you should do something about that. But
yeah,
we're also
a model, like if we were going to be idealists for a second,
yeah,
and your pragmatic views, you had one day to rule the nation. A model would be a water insecure nation like Singapore. So Singapore recycles 100% of its water.
Really?
100%. So if it hits
rain from all the above, like municipal,
water coming off the sidewalk, obviously it rains a lot there.
Yeah,
flushing the toilet and everything in the middle, all the other uses of water. They send all of that to their water plants, which are sophisticated enough to recycle 100% of the water into a reservoir for storage.
Okay.
So they've taken the approach that we need to be self-sufficient because they have a monsoonal climate. So some part of the year it rains a lot. It's like Florida. Some part of the year it doesn't.
Right.
So we just need to be 100% self-sufficient for the national security. The counterexample would be Taiwan.
Okay.
So Taiwan did not invest in these same technologies of both storage, reservoirs, and then water treatment.
Okay.
Taiwan, on a seasonal basis, which of course it rains a lot there, but sometimes it doesn't. On a seasonal basis, they get water insecure, and several times per year they run out of water, right? So you'd think like, hey, you guys are trying to be independent. You should probably build more reservoirs and more water treatment so that you can recycle the water and store it.
Do you think something like that, like where are we at? So you have Taiwan on one end and then you have Singapore on the other end. If we're looking at that on like a spectrum, where does the U.S. land on that spectrum?
We're kind of in the radical middle, I'd say. We do have some pretty...
Just hiring you as BD, man.
Yeah. We do have seasonal droughts, and then we have issues. You have, Flint, Michigan, and whatnot. But, we are on the spectrum. I think we're just more blessed because we have these ridiculously long rivers which some of them start in Canada. So we got to thank our northern neighbors. Let's make sure we thank Canada for that. But we do have just access to so much water. And like where you and I live in Florida, where it rains all the time. We have reservoirs. And then we're also sitting on top of an aquifer. So it's like, I think what makes sense is to strategically align the consumption with the access, right? So it's like, hey, where's a good place to do solar? Arizona and California, obviously, because the sun is always shining. Where's a great place to do water intensive processes? A place like Florida, because we have tons of water, right?
Does that mean? I mean, so what? This is the short-sightedness, right? Forest meet the trees sort of thing. Are we just not addressing that because there's so many other things that we have to get in place first? Or is it sort of like this abundance that it's out of sight, out of mind, and it's going to take something epic for us to get our shit together on the waterfront? Like, I feel like the energy thing to me is not, it's not the sky is falling, because we could figure that out, I think, really, really quick. Like, once again, you run out of water. You know this, man. After a hurricane, you have the old timers sitting on the porch with their gun after 2 days of not having running water. Like, it gets pretty epic pretty fast.
Yeah, well, I will say, we do, for the audience that doesn't go through hurricanes once a year like Dan and I do.
I mean, there's a lot of Houstonians here, so
we actually do run out of water after a hurricane, and the reason is the water pumps that bring us the water in our very flat state. They run on electricity. So when the power plants come down, or if we're worried about flooding and the floodwaters could rise up to the pump level, they turn everything off to protect it, so they don't wreck it, right? So it actually does happen here that we numerous times, us Floridians, will fill the bathtub, or we're filling all the
bathtub. Yeah, that's right. What are you doing with the bathtub? You're right.
Yeah, I think in short, we need to take a hard look at infrastructure for the nation, right? Is we needed the water, we need the power. Now we can't live without internet. That's how we're here today. So we got to take a hard look at the infrastructure, and we got to really start making smart bets.
Yeah.
So I will plug a project that we're working on right now, which is we've just commissioned a plant that can manufacture biodiesel at wastewater treatment plants.
Okay.
So here's the theory. Every time a restaurant washes the dishes, that oil that if it was in the fry thing, you'd make biodiesel with it, right? That's already happening.
Yeah.
Well, that oil in trace amounts from everybody goes through the wastewater treatment plant where it piles up.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, it's an environmental hazard, right? Concentrated goop, basically.
Yeah.
And if it gets into the environment, that's not good for our...
Yeah, you shouldn't be pouring that into the sewer. Like, that's a big no-no.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes down the drain. When you take a shower, the body oil comes off, right? And it all builds up is the point. So one big thing we can do for water is look at harvesting value from water so that we have the resources to just produce clean water at the treatment centers. So this one little increment that we took that we think is a big idea is to commission a biodiesel plant that can take that collected goop at the end of the line and then produce a usable commodity, right? That's valuable to cities. And as you know, like biodiesel, you can run a diesel engine on biodiesel. That's how it was.
Yeah, and there's a variety of industries that would be very amenable to utilizing that. Where are you guys doing this at? Where's the
pilot case? The pilot plant is in Connecticut. So we currently have one whole township running 100% off our biodiesel.
Yeah.
We're looking for an expansion market, and I'm optimistic that a place like Jacksonville be that expansion market. So what we really need is a 1 million person city to make this migration of this tech.
Mm-hmm.
The benefits are, of course, you remediate the environmental hazard. That's gone. It's been turned into biodiesel, but then imagine a city that makes money off of energy.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of a paradigm flip. This is money coming into the city budget a year. What are you gonna do with that? I don't know. So build a park or something cool, right? Here's your money.
Yes, please go do that.
Yeah.
So you have this proven concept pilot, right, in Connecticut. The idea is to bring it back home, to scale it out. Like, what do you need to get that done? Like, what's the missing pieces?
Yeah, I think, it's just getting the city leadership together and making sure they see the vision and the opportunity. I think that the prize, if I was, I'm not the mayor, but if I was the mayor, I'll be the king for a minute. The prize is really, okay, this is a green eco technology that makes money. And that means we're going to have chemists and engineers, computer programmers somewhere in America to facilitate this industry. I want that in my city. So I'm gonna give you the keys of the castle. I'm gonna say, hey, take over the city, make your biodiesel, clean up the water. We're thankful for that. But as a trade-off, I want that technical center of excellence here in my city.
Right.
So if I'm the mayor, that's the deal that I cut. I want the cutting edge. Every mayor wants good economics, green innovation. That's good for the mayor.
Yeah, we played this stupid game, frankly, where we just dumped a boatload of money into stuff that we were hoping to work. And we sort of, at least with the energy quote unquote transition, didn't abide by the laws of capital discipline. Certainly we didn't prioritize returns. And now there seems to be this reversion to more pragmatic thinking where, yeah, let's pursue green innovation. And frankly, who cares what adjective you utilize with innovation? Innovation is innovation. It doesn't matter what you put in front of it. But, for the longest time, not the longest time, for a 4-year period, let's call it, that was before the 60 days ago, there was this notion that you didn't, for whatever reason, have to incorporate ROI and capital efficiency and capital discipline in the mix. And now, ironically, that's being re-implemented, and you're seeing just an expedited set of capabilities brought forth because we're getting back to basics.
I think in your sector, one of the hottest examples of that was the how many billions spent for a handful of electric car chargers, right?
Oh, good Lord.
So the better way to say it, right? And this is if you had the engineer running the show.
Yeah, which I do not really.
Is the government desires to have, electric car charging, right? We want more access to electric car charging. Good for me, by the way, because I have an electric car. So I want to charge it everywhere. And now I have to find out where the chargers are. So
it's not a Cybertruck, is it?
It is a Cybertruck. And it has power share, and the Tesla Cybertruck is the backup power to the Chang household. So it is really system. Yeah, it is.
Right. Did you get rid of last time I saw you had the surfboard in the back of the F-150, right? You got rid of the F-150?
The F-150's gone.
Where are you putting the surfboard?
The surfboard, Cybertruck, man.
It fits in the Cybertruck?
Absolutely. Yeah, full bed. Same size bed. So,
okay.
So here's kind of the way to do this electric car charging thing. Instead of throwing money at it, which means you knew the right technologies and you knew the right service providers.
Yeah.
Maybe we didn't based on the capital efficiency of those chargers. You'd say, hey, look, we're making this incentive available. Then you can apply. We're going to subsidize it based off the following performance.
Mm-hmm.
Let the people that want to provide their technology sign up for the performance level.
Right. Have them
right. So you can max out our formula and you can get the following rebate or grant, whatever it was, based on providing this much access. Hey, okay, we get it. Maybe it's harder to do in rural Iowa than downtown Atlanta. So we're going to make it a sliding scale. But that way there's kind of a rule base, and your idea of the capital markets and that efficiency of capital, that comes into play because the incentive structure is there. Companies are only doing this to make money. Well, now that we can unpack that event of, spending billions for a handful of chargers, do you think the best companies and the best technology providers were involved?
No,
probably not. Right.
Yeah.
So you didn't have an incentive structure for the market to compete to solve a problem. And I think, so whether it's water, EV charging, data centers, any of these structural problems that we see coming that are going to stress our infrastructure, we probably need to look at a performance-based approach so that the people that want to put the risk in, like, hey, I think I could solve this. Okay, fine. Here's the formula, and you get paid based on how well you perform.
Well, it's just, 100%. I just think it's to just expand upon that. It's hard to gauge progress and success without the appropriate KPIs. Like, are you doing a good job? Like, it feels that way. Like, you need to have this bottom-up KPI or bottom-up set of KPIs. And the government, and I think Trump is actually a wizard at this, like, should not preemptively pick the winners and the losers and say, this is what we're going with. They should create this very balanced sandbox, if you will, and have the best of the best duke it out measured by an objective set of KPIs. Like, I just don't understand. The top-down thing just historically has never worked, not to give like the history lesson. And we were talking about this on a prior episode, but this frankly stupid notion that we continually fall into this trap where we think we can tax our way into prosperity or regulate our way out of a problem just never works. And hopefully we have the next, call it 18 to 24 months, I'm talking about before primaries, where we really do give entrepreneurs like yourself the right environment, the right set of rules to just look at a problem and then give them, within the boundaries of reason and, you know, rules, of course, like carte blanche of like, go figure it out and then tell us what we need to do and then create policy and implement policy around that. Like that, I know I'm not an idealist, but I'm hoping that that is the case, right? We have this window of opportunity where people like yourself can just go solve problems, and then that is the blueprint for what policy should be moving forward.
Yeah, and you know the other part of that is if we believe the newspapers or believe that, you know, X, whatever, wherever we get our news, then there's a massive amount of inbound investment for American infrastructure, manufacturing, this sort of stuff. So you read the headlines, you know, Saudi Arabia is in, Japan is in, and everybody wants to
massive investment.
So, okay, if that money is actually coming in, then does it have a way to hit the street? Because I'll give you a data point. The first infrastructure bill was over the stimulus was over $1 trillion.
Yeah.
According to the economic study by the government, to implement that $1 trillion, the United States was at a number of engineers deficit of 88,000. I'm not talking about tradesmen. I'm not talking about contractors, material suppliers. Just the engineers were at 88,000. Well, we're kind of like doctors, right? It takes a long time to make us. And then
you're like Tommy Boy. A lot of people go to school for 7 years. Yeah. They're called doctors.
And then here's the other way we're like doctors. You do not want us when we're right out of school, right? You want the person that has actually done it a few times and knows what they're talking about. So the clock speed on making a new engineer just to deploy the infrastructure funding that's already in place, we're talking, 10 years. If you start now with high school graduates before you can use them, you know, so if
do we have a shortage of engineers in the United States?
Yeah.
And it's pretty epic.
It's not epic. It slows things down.
Yeah.
Right. That's the issue is some of the change you want to see, you want it to happen fast, right? Okay.
Yeah.
We got the tariffs. We want to reshore manufacturing. Let's go. Well, okay. I can't go solve the water crisis, the energy crisis, and the manufacturing crisis at the same time. We have a bottleneck of technical expertise, and it's just got to take a while to get through there. So, you know, that's the other question is, so you got this foreign direct investment coming into U.S. manufacturing and supply chain.
Yeah.
You got this existing stimulus that's out there, and then you have the natural organic growth of the economy. Yeah. You know, how do you solve that, and how do you do it quickly? Because
you go back to like your comment of like what would Dan do if he was ruler for a day? Like one of the things, I mean, there are several things. Like one of the things I would do is I would outline like the top 10 problems that would call into question, or maybe vulnerabilities, like the top 10 vulnerabilities that would, you know, put us in a position where we're either declining socioeconomically or that would, you know, question our military dominance or some sort of social or whatever it is. And, you know, you create a reasonable set of guidelines and rules that you have to operate in. But I would say, look, you guys can compete with these other ones, and whoever wins, not only will we pay for your school, you never have to pay taxes ever, right? We'd solve a shitload of problems if, like the whole point that you were making, if the incentive structure were right, which brings me back to the point of like over-taxation and over-regulation is inherently dumb. And obviously we're witnessing the impacts of that. But like, if you want to unleash the Kraken, you have to have that incentive structure in there that's pretty pragmatic, but certainly a motivating catalyst to get shit done.
Yeah.
That's my rant for the day.
Yeah. Did you just advocate that professional engineers should not pay taxes?
I said, if they solve certain problems, they shouldn't have to pay taxes. Yeah. Like as an individual who pays a boatload of taxes, I hate paying taxes. Like I'm gonna I'm going to schedule my therapy session in mid-April after I cut that check that I do every year. But
Yeah,
I mean,
for your younger listeners, what I always tell people is my favorite day in a person's life is when they start complaining about their taxes and they need a tax guy. I'm like, what a fantastic problem to have, you know?
yeah, I get, yeah, it is a privilege, but at the same time, I'm not going to lie, man. It's a rough day in the Romito household.
Yeah, I think the short answer is the most efficient structure is not to have 100,000 rules or whatever our current tax code is that nobody truly understands, and some people play fair and some don't.
Right.
Is just have a single tax, right? So a consumption tax, a tariff tax, a whatever the system is, make it streamlined and easy to understand.
Right.
So it just gets automated. One thing you can take to the bank is every time you swipe or tap at the store, Stripe is getting paid.
Yeah.
Visa's getting paid every single time. I don't know why we can't have it be so simple that at the same transaction, the government's getting paid.
Well, like too, a lot of the engineering firms I would imagine are in the similar boat as you. Like for all intents and purposes, respectfully, you're a small business, and you hiring one more person, the first thing I would imagine you're going to look like is, what is the impact to my payroll tax? What is the impact to the health and benefits I have to pay this person? What's the incremental cost on whatever it has to do on potential income that comes in that I'm going to have to be taxed on? All this bullshit, which is a conversation for another day. And what sucks is we got to start wrapping this thing up. So, I feel like I did not do that great of a job of promoting Chang Industrial. Give me the commercial, man. Like what should people know about your firm?
Yeah, well, we'll just have to do it again so I can plug some stuff.
Definitely.
From your book.
Today was a little remote from the beach. We'll do a remote from the beach. We'll do it.
Yeah, today was about Dan Romito's book. That was the podcast today. So the the summary is, we deploy robotic systems in the workforce, right? And some of the big wins we have, that if there was a somebody that leads an organization and wants a lot of robots, that we're the people to call. But the big wins was last month we deployed our first robotic hospital. So we're super excited about that. We think it's a game changer for hospital operations. It's specifically in this hospital, every nurse now has a helper robot. So we think it's a game changer for nurses. And here's the critical factor, Ray. You can't get more skeptical than nurses and teachers. Those are the skeptics.
That sounds about right.
We got a 96% approval rate from the nurses. So 96% of nurses that interact, that now they all have them.
So that 96% of the nurses that you surveyed gave you a thumbs up?
That's right. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So we're stoked about that. A really epic initiative that we're just launching is the first autonomous port in the United States. So I'm not going to give details today, but we'll save that for a future episode.
Okay.
But what that means for the efficiency of logistics and the goodness for the longshoremen, I think is incredible. So we always take the course in mind. So I got to get a 96. I got the 96 with the nurses. I got to get a 96 with the longshoremen. That's a good objective.
Can you reveal the location of said port?
Texas.
Okay.
Clue.
Very cool.
Texas. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Backyard.
So yeah, we'll just go see it together. So, and then other things that we're doing that are important is, I mentioned we're in factories right now. So if every manufacturing CEO is sitting out there trying to figure out, what am I going to do? Yeah. The problem is, you go to LinkedIn or you go to YouTube, you can find 100 videos of robot things that look like it might work, and you don't have confidence in any of it. And you certainly
T1000 jokes, that's just all that. Like that, the T1000 joke is like my landman joke.
Yeah, well, you're also not going to pick from the 100, right? It's kind of like paralysis by analysis. So
right.
The easiest way to get started is you bring us in, we assess the operation, we figure out what's viable, and we do that, really fast, probably 6 to 8 weeks. So we can get any of our executive clients within 6 to 8 weeks a very clear-eyed strategy of what's going to work, what's not going to work, and what might be an opportunity in a few years.
Okay.
Right. And that solves the question of, how do I get AI in my operation?
Yeah.
Well, you're not going to have AI in your operation until you have robotics, right? That's kind of for manufacturing.
One goes with the other.
Yeah. So we help them figure that out, and then we help them understand a realistic timeline. It's not going to happen next week, right? But 10 years, they might not be working there anymore. So what's a realistic timeline that we can get this delivered in?
Okay. Look, man, this has been awesome. I feel like me and you could talk forever, and clearly there's going to be a variety of future episodes. I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate the perspective and looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, stoked. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Talk to you soon.